Let me start this webinar by welcoming all of those of you who have joined us to this point. We know we have others who will be joining us. Today is to be a robust conversation about one of the most important facets of our community, one of the greatest, among the greatest institutions this nation has ever had, and that's historically Black colleges and universities. The role that HBCUs has played in helping our communities to grow and expand and prosper must never be forgotten. And we now need these great institutions more than ever before. And so today we are blessed to have alumni, to have students, to have one of the greatest leaders of our historical Black colleges in terms of one of our greatest presidents, and to have community activists and a champion who's been our host, who has championed advancing for all of our communities. This is just the first of a number of series that we will have during this pandemic, because we know while we may not be in the classroom, we may not be on our campuses, and we may not be joining in our traditional places like restaurants and traditional places where we gather and have conversation, we have to stay connected. And we have to make sure we're sharing information so that we can meet the challenges of COVID-19. Life will not be the same again, not as we've known it. But the important thing is to understand, if we do what's right, if we stay focused, if we do what the medical professionals are telling us we have to do, we'll survive this. And there are those, as we get prepared to get into some dialogue, to understand that we have medical professionals from every walk of life who are watching and looking at what happened in other countries and what's happening here. And while we have been disproportionately impacted as African Americans, a lot of that has been because of preconditions. We understand that before access to healthcare, we want to talk about racism and poverty. Yes, those issues existed quite a bit leading up to this pandemic. But this pandemic is not going around saying, I want to find Black folks and I'm going to infect them. We have to understand what we've learned before and what we're seeing manifested now. We've got to do a better job of taking care of ourselves, dealing with the whole issue of obesity, dealing with the problem with diabetes, dealing with hypertension. All of those pre-existing factors now are creating greater challenges for us today. So we're going to survive this. But this should help us to understand moving forward, we've got to deal with those preconditions. We got to make sure we have healthier communities. But right now, we've got to all stand together, work together, focus together, because we can survive this. But we also need to be preparing for what we're going to do post-pandemic. So with that, I'm really happy to introduce to those of you who've joined us today, our moderator for the day. This young lady has been phenomenal, hails from the Windy City, has been in this great city of Atlanta. Many people call it Chocolate City South. Many call it part of the Mecca. I call it home. It is a phenomenal place that we call the soul of America, but your cities are the soul of America too. We have with us, as our moderator, Commissioner Natalie Hall. She's a Fulton County Commissioner, but she's been a champion of our communities for so many years. She understands and embraces education. She's an undergraduate with a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Information Systems, which we need right now as we talk about technology. And she earned a master's degree in Business Administration and Public Administration from the Keller Graduate School of Management here in Atlanta, Georgia. Commissioner Natalie Hall serves as our Executive Director for the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame Foundation. She's a champion. She's a battler. She is one of those, if you want to fight and deal for what's right in our community, you want her on the front line with you. It is my pleasure to now introduce Natalie Hall, Executive Director of the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame, who will serve as our moderator today. Natalie.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dortch. What an awesome introduction. I am honored to be your host today for this HBCU Empowerment Virtual Series. And we have some of the most outstanding panelists today. You're going to hear some information that is truly needed across the HBCU world, information about resources, the impact and how we're all going to work together to get through this. So I want to start this off first by letting everyone know that if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please go to the Q&A section and submit your questions. You also will see a chat section, but we would prefer if we keep all questions inside of that Q&A section of the webinar. So that way we can jump out there and pull some of those questions and have our panelists respond and answer those for you as we move through this webinar. First, I want to begin our introductions with Dr. Roslyn Artis. Dr. Artis is a two-time first female president of a collegiate institution. She is the 14th president of Benedict College after serving 4 years as president at Florida Memorial University. A well-admired face in the circle of university presidents and amongst the many boards, committees, and chairing affiliates, Dr. Artis is the co-chair for the National Summit for Sustainability of HBCUs being held in Atlanta in September. Dr. Artis is described as an intentional professional that is thoroughly committed to the proliferation and transformation of colleges and universities that serve underrepresented men and women of color. A prolific speaker, critical thinker, and fierce advocate for educational access, Dr. Artis has been recognized for her work locally and nationally and is frequently engaged as a mentor, lecturer, and catalyst for strategic transformation. Welcome to our webinar, Dr. Artis.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to have an opportunity to talk with you and our viewing audience today about a topic that is near and dear to me, and that is the historically Black college and university context in an era of COVID-19. As you all know, our communities have been most directly impacted by the virus for a myriad of reasons that we'll discuss here today. Historically Black colleges and universities have a particularly unique role to play. Unfortunately, all of our campuses, as you know, have been shifted to an online format to allow our students to safely return home in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. We have effectively closed small cities. While we have a tremendous amount of respect for the great city of Atlanta and all of our other cities, the Windy City included, our college campuses, our HBCU campuses truly are cities as well. We provide food service, we provide housing, we provide sports and entertainment, education, healthcare, police, and first responders all are employed on the campuses of our historically Black colleges and universities. And so each and every area of the response to COVID-19 impacts a historically Black college. We are also not simply located in our communities, but we are of the communities that we serve. And therefore, we are a valuable resource as we think about responding to COVID-19, being education providers, being resource and outreach, a hub and spoke, if you will, for many of our communities of color in this country. We have a unique opportunity. COVID-19 has threatened our already fragile institutions, but I'm confident that if we work together and collaboratively as a community, not only will we emerge better and stronger, but our institutions will be known heretofore and forever as the institutions that impacted our communities most during the COVID-19 crisis. I'm so pleased to be with you today.
Thank you so much for joining us. And Mr. Dortch, you're going to speak on our
Well, yeah, I want to, again, before we get into the dialogue, I want to make sure we give a very special thanks to those corporations who have been working with us over the years and working with us now and who are sponsoring this series, this webinar series for us. And they also are responsible for our college tours, which we will get back into action after this, after the coast is clear, for our Legacy Lecture Series. So we want to say a very special thank you to Wells Fargo, which has been supporting our efforts over the years. And of course, they have made a commitment over 150 million to provide for in support of small business, nonprofits, and to help us with our HBCUs. So I want to say thank you to them. The Georgia Pacific Foundation, which has been a longstanding supporter, recently gave $25 million to UNCF in support of HBCUs, and Curly Dossman, the president of the Georgia Pacific Foundation, and last but not least, Merck Pharmaceuticals. So we want to say a very special thank you to them for staying committed and supporting our series. And so now back to you, Natalie.
All right, Mr. Dortch, thank you so much for that. Our next panelist is Andres Dre Martin, also known as Seats by Dre. He's a youth empowerment advocate, diversity and inclusion enthusiast, and a visionary who is the founder and executive director of HBCU Night, a multifaceted event and a 501c3 nonprofit geared towards creating awareness for HBCUs, networking opportunities, and resources for prospective college students. Inspired by speakers in a series of moderated panel discussions he coordinated throughout his work experience at the NBA, Martin decided to start his own community-based entity, Seats by Dre, geared towards speaking engagements, diversity and inclusion initiatives, and HBCU empowerment strategies. With his undergraduate experience at Grambling State University to his executive MBA studies at Howard University, Martin has joined the movement of raising awareness for illustrious HBCUs by celebrating HBCUs with the HBCU Night experience. He continues to live out his purpose by bridging the gaps between prospective college students and HBCUs and shining light on HBCU excellence globally. Through his company, Seats by Dre, this young trailblazer out of Waterbury, Connecticut, has made it his obligation to display dedication with an unparalleled work ethic to open every door, get a seat at the table, obtain goals, and talk more seats. Welcome, Dre.
I know that was a bit of a
that was an
orthodox introduction, but thank you so much. I'll probably update that a little bit, but nonetheless, I'm very, very pleased and honored to be a part of this speaker series. Just to reiterate, I'm the founder and executive director of HBCU United Incorporated. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization and an event as well that we travel with. And you know, it comprises of 5 elements, and it's geared towards a multitude of demographics. And really our goal is just to create awareness for prospective college students, as mentioned, but also, you know, help out HBCU alumni and help increase the HBCU endowment with a lot of, you know, fundraising strategies that the alumni associations utilize when partnering with our event and our nonprofit organization. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And next on our panel is Tangela Mitchell. Tangela is the reigning Miss National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame 2019 and 2020. She is a graduating senior, political science major, Spanish and creative writing double minor at Spelman College from Fayetteville, North Carolina. She has always been active on campus, serving as a first-year class president, a 3-year Spelman College student ambassador, and a study abroad ambassador. Most recently, she served as Miss Spelman College 2019 and 2020 under the platform The Pursuit of Wholeness, where she encouraged Spelmanites to accept and celebrate their whole stories and selves. As Miss National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame, she has served on the board of directors, participated as panelist on the Legacy Lecture Series tours, and has used her title as an entrance in other arenas to bring awareness to the significance of HBCUs, serving the communities surrounding them and advocating for HBCU students. In late 2019, she spearheaded the Hometown Tour, where she visited local high schools in Fayetteville, North Carolina, to talk to students about college readiness, HBCUs, and how to fund their college education. Upon graduation, Tangela will be pursuing her Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing with a concentration in poetry. Welcome to the panel, Tangela.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Hello, everyone. It is definitely an honor to be here, to be on this empowerment series, and to, represent the student perspective in all of this. COVID-19 has definitely affected us in a particularly strong manner, and I feel it's important to voice that and to talk to the different ways in which students are struggling to, make it through this period of time, whether that be financially, dealing with the loss of their senior year. A lot of us are mourning the loss of our graduations and all the sacred ceremonies that we know are inherent to our HBCU experience. And that's weighing on us. And so it's an honor to be that voice and to be that representative of those students here today with all of you.
Thank you, Tangela. And last but not least, we have Mr. Thomas W. Dortch Jr. He is a proud graduate of historically Black universities, Fort Valley State University and Clark Atlanta University. He is a proud member of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. He is chairman and chief executive officer of TWD Incorporated, a 6-business conglomerate based in Atlanta, Georgia. He serves on the boards of several HBCUs and other national organizations, including his latest installation as chairman of the 100 Black Men of America Incorporated. He is a much sought after speaker on national and international levels. He is the recipient of numerous awards and honors that celebrate his unselfish community service and philanthropic efforts. He has had guest appearances on a number of shows, including the Oprah Winfrey Show. With his many accolades, his most humbling of an introduction is a person who has an in-depth love and passion for the existence and preservation of historically Black colleges and universities. It is my pleasure to introduce the founder and chairman of the board of the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame Foundation, Thomas W. Dortch Jr. Welcome.
Again, Natalie, it's a pleasure to be here. In my opening remarks, I just want everybody, opening remarks is that, yes, I love HBCUs. All 5 of my children attended HBCUs, and it's important that while I may be an alumnus of 2, and I have 5 honorary doctor's degrees from 5 other HBCUs, my commitment is to all of these great institutions. And so to the alumni who may be on this call, to the students, these institutions were there for us when none others would allow us. And we have to continue to fight for them, support them, write our checks for them, send our children back. And so this series today is just one of the steps to make sure we stay connected, and just know that all of us have to fight to ensure that they will prosper and grow, because these institutions have great contributions and much more that they're going to do for this nation. Without them, we would not be where we are. And with them, we're going to prosper and survive and flourish. So it's a pleasure to be here with this great team that's a part of this webinar today.
Well, welcome everyone. And we're going to start this conversation about COVID and the community. You know, this COVID-19 virus has created a pandemic in the United States and abroad, and it is completely impacting our HBCUs, our small businesses, our nonprofit organizations. But since we have panelists like yourself here, we want to specifically focus on the HBCU perspective and the impact of COVID-19. So starting with you, Dr. Artis, from the president's narrative, can you speak to COVID-19, the impact it's having on our HBCUs, what you're seeing, the needs being in the HBCU community, and what we're doing to try to move forward and be successful and work together?
Sure. Well, Natalie, great question. COVID-19 has drastically impacted the core business of historically Black colleges and universities across the country. Our first challenge, obviously, was evacuating our campus to ensure the safety of our students. Unlike many students who attend predominantly white institutions or well-funded institutions, our students weren't quite as agile, meaning they could not leave as quickly without some financial support and subsidy. So we were pleased at Benedict College to launch an immediate fundraising effort that started with our Board of Trustees and expanded into our community that enabled us to provide travel assistance for 125 students. So we were a travel agency for the first couple days, purchasing plane tickets, train tickets, running 24-hour shuttle service to Charlotte, Augusta, and Columbia and Charleston airports to assist our students with getting home safely. So the first wave, as it were, was just getting our kids home safely, which was exacerbated by the low wealth nature of the vast majority of our students. Subsequent to that, our next challenge was transitioning to online learning. John Sylvanus Wilson, former president of Morehouse College, has often said, "You don't make a Morehouse man online." Very seldom do the gifts, talents, and treasures of the historically Black college experience come to us virtually. It is the experience on the campus, it is the love and support of the faculty, it is the engagement of the staff, it's the experience with the students participating with their classmates, colleagues, and friends that builds the kind of intestinal fortitude that HBCUs are famous for producing. So displacing our students and forcing them into an online environment really compromised the quality of the HBCU experience. That was challenge number 2, and I'm proud to say our faculty have really weathered that, and our students have worked extremely hard to wrap up the semester. Third for us are the financial implications. It certainly would have been inappropriate for us not to extend refunds to students who had paid for housing and food that they did not eat and rooms they were not able to sleep in due to the forced evacuation. Benedict has now refunded all room and board unused by our students, which comes at a significant economic impact to the institution that was already challenged financially. But recognizing the financial stability of our students was perhaps more precarious than that of the institution, we went ahead and advanced those refunds. As we look forward to what we can expect in the fall, we know that our students want desperately to come back to our campuses, and we want desperately to have them back. A college campus is not a college campus without its students, particularly an HBCU. And so as we look at multiple models for how we will start the fall semester, predominantly white institutions very often will have, 1, stronger IT infrastructure for online learning. 2, they will have larger, more expansive physical facilities that will allow them to provide social spacing. We are known for small class sizes and high-touch environments. That is the antithesis of what you want to see in a COVID-19 environment. And so the ability to spread our students out means more sections of classes, increased educational costs. As we think about dormitories, many of ours are doubles, triples, and quads. Half the experience is living with your colleagues and friends on a college campus. If we have to resort to single room assignments, the significant increase to the room and board that we can expect to collect will be catastrophic for the institution and certainly diminish the student's experience. So first and foremost, we are concerned with the safety of our students, and secondly, the financial stability of an already compromised institution. And I think my colleagues at HBCUs across the country are all feeling those very same pressures.
Thank you so much, Dr. Artis. And Tangela, we are so happy to have you here to speak from the student narrative on housing for those living outside of their hometowns and the future of prospective jobs. And so please share with us what you are seeing and hearing and experiencing from the student perspective.
Definitely. I think it to be common knowledge that for a lot of students, HBCUs, their HBCU is not just a school. For many students, it is a sanctuary. It's a saving grace. Many students don't have a stable home to go back to. Their HBCUs were definitely saving them from something. So with the closing of our campuses, many people were put out of course, they were displaced, having to either go back home or having to find somewhere to stay or someone to stay with in the cities in which their HBCUs are located. Also, there are many students who had leases that they can't break. They were living off campus and wanting to go home in light of what's going on, wanting to be with their families. They either have to go home and pay rent on an apartment in which they are not staying, or were forced to stay because they couldn't break that lease, which causes a financial strain that they feel is no longer necessary because they aren't going to school in this city anymore. So the fact that they have to stay and continue to pay rent is a financial burden, but also the burden of having to be separated from your family. is also something that was an issue. So for those students who were living on campus, of course, like as Dr. Artis said, there was the quick financial burden of having to get home quickly. And I know there were different campuses did different things. For instance, I know Spelman had a small financial hardship application that a student could do. And if they could prove that they needed to stay on campus for a longer time, whether that be a week or 2 weeks or to the end of the semester, the student was able to do that. So currently at Spelman, I believe there to be between 40 and 50 students who are still currently living on the campus, having to practice social distancing, of course. So it's been quite hard for students who don't have a home to go to, but we're not allowed to stay on campus. They're kind of in the middle ground, staying with different friends who are still in the city, trying to reach out to different alumni who are in the city and are willing to open their homes to students. So it's been something that people are trying to find a way to deal with. Also, those who broke their lease to go home. In light of what's going on, there have been landlords who have been understanding, but some who haven't. So dealing with that issue as well has been another hardship on top of what we are already dealing with. So from what I'm seeing, there are students who are in different situations, but another one in particular are for students who were able to go home. A lot of families weren't equipped to deal with another person at home. So, our families get used to having a child away for 10 months. So a child coming home early, some people, their room has been compromised, or their family has to now deal with someone else being in the home and that someone not being able to work and carry their own weight, one would say. So there are a number of multifaceted situations that are going on in terms of students and their housing right now.
Thank you for that, Tangela. And Dre, from the alumni perspective, will you please speak to employment and assistance and anything else that might be important to share?
Yes, absolutely. One, I think it's imperative when we're addressing the current, situation right now during this COVID-19 crisis that we're facing, this pandemic, is to address some of the statistics that, African American and Latino, essentially, those categorized demographics that are a part of a lot of HBCU alumni demographics, how some of those demographics are affected from an employment perspective. So right now, as of February 2020, the overall unemployment rate was at 3.5%, and that was a 50-year low, right? And for the Black unemployment rate, that was at 5.8% as opposed to the white unemployment rate, which was at 3.1%, right? And then when you talk about, the unemployment rate and of those are unemployed, a lot of those demographics between the Latinx and the African American demographics, hence the a majority of the HBCU community, a lot of those demographics, one in 5 African American and Latinos are pretty much working from home, as opposed to everybody else working in essential service industries, i.e. medical assistants, certified nurse assistants, grocery workers, delivery personnel, bus drivers, postal workers, etc. Those are our frontline workers right now, aside from, majority of the medical industry, but those are who are mainly affected. Now those are some of the issues, right? Now, I want to really present, what we can do to kind of combat some of these issues right now that we're facing. And some of the HBCU entities and some of the minority entities that are really helping provide, these pipelines to help provide employment opportunities for Latinx, African American demographics are really such as, JOPWELs, the JOPWELs of the world, the HBCU 20x20s of the world, right? So essentially, these organizations, they are providing opportunities and solutions for those who are facing, issues of being furloughed, laid off, having issues with unemployment, or just wanting to step into the corporate sector in general and just, help more with their financial situations. Now, these in particular, there's opportunities out there right now. I know HBCU 20 by 20, they specifically have job boards that they partner with, and they partner with, large companies such as AT&T, Bain, Dell, Revolt, Twitter, Uber. There's a multitude of different companies that they partner with, but those are just some examples that our HBCU alumni specifically can go to and utilize those, that resource as really, some sort of method for assistance, right? And it's something that provides assistance to a lot of these people who are affected, a lot of Black families, a lot of Latinx families. And also, specifically speaking, I know Jopwa has like a quarantine con, even today at 6 o'clock, if anybody is, who is tuned in, or maybe even if you want to share with some of these HBCU alumni demographics, they have these career fairs that these people can attend virtually. It's a quarantine con, and those have employers such as, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley. There's a large, pool of different employers that actually attend these to help, our HBCU alumni demographic, to help our minority demographics. So again, just to reiterate, obviously the statistics have are showing as, a decline, and there is a lot of issues going on right now that we have to really try to solve and really try to provide assistance for. So I think those two entities, amongst others, are very important for our HBCU community to reference and utilize. But yeah, we need to combat these issues with utilizing those specific resources. So again, HBCU 20 by 20. Again, they're a diversity and inclusion entity that helps HBCU alumni, and even Jopwell, they help minorities as well with trying to secure jobs and employment issues as well. So I know those are some specific employment issues that in areas that we can try to utilize within our community to help our HBCU alumni and so forth.
Well, thank you, Dre, for that. And I'm going to go next to Mr. Dortch. Can you please speak to the status of African American business and the potential HBCUs report on, and give us a business narrative on that?
Well, one of the important things that we've been watching is understanding that a number of our graduates are entrepreneurs, are either executives in corporate America. I own 6 businesses, and I've watched what the trends throughout. Recently, we had the CARES Act, which, by the way, Tangela, I'm going to make sure that our team at the 100s, at the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame Foundation office, that we post. There are certain protections that are part of this CARES Act, where individuals cannot be forced to have to pay if they don't have the ability to. And we'll post those provisions. I think there's a 6-month provision. Don't quote me on this now, but we'll post it on our website. So we want to make sure we provide support for those landlords who are not complying with the federal mandate that was passed by Congress and signed into law. So I'll do that. But disproportionately for us, even in business, there was the PPP program that was passed under the CARES Act, which provided $350 billion that was to include small business in the loop, to help make sure that small businesses had a bridge to, we could continue to employ the individuals that we do. Out of that first $350 billion, almost $290 billion went to small publicly traded companies, taking up $290 billion of $350 billion, and African American owned and minority owned businesses got very little of that money. And so there's been a new appropriations that has been passed. This time, after many of us raised our voices and concern, there's been about $30 billion that's supposed to be earmarked for quote, minority banks, Black and other banks that serve communities of color. And we're working to make sure that we're going to have access there. But it's created a problem. And it's created a problem for our businesses as we look at many of our businesses have been fortunate to do business with HBCU campuses. And they're out of business right now in terms of having access to alternative plans. With my 6 businesses, 2 are operating, 1 is flourishing because we provide, for example, the part of the modern mobility program. So we had to hire about 43 more people 2 weeks ago because we're responsible for getting seniors to the doctor's appointments and dialysis and getting them even to pick up food. But all businesses are unfortunate. Our airport, which over 40% of the businesses that operated in Hartsfield, Jackson, and those who operate around the corner, around the country, they're out of business right now. They can't provide those services. And then I think when we look at the challenges now, many of these companies aren't going to come back. And that's so unfortunate. I got my PPP from Unity National Bank, which is a Black-owned bank. I had 3 major national banks calling me in advance, asking me to apply. But I chose to take my business to Black banks. The 100 Black Men of America did a PPP. We did it with a Black bank here in Atlanta, Citizen Trust. And the church I represent, I chair the board, went to a Black bank. So, and there are businesses in our community so that they'll have resources to keep lending. After this pandemic is over, not only will the philanthropists from our community be hurt and not be able to support our HBCUs, not be able to support our basic communities, we're gonna have to come together collectively as a community and decide on now, are we going to do business with our own businesses in our community? Because we're not just talking about businesses being able to make contributions to HBCUs and other nonprofits in our community. We're talking about families being able to afford to send their children to college, being able to pay the tuition. And unfortunately, we don't have a leader in the White House like we had with President Obama, who was able to withstand one of the worst economic downturns this nation had seen then. This is going to be even worse. And so from the perspective of Black-owned and Hispanic-owned and other minority-owned businesses, we're devastated, I mean, as a whole. Fortunately, we had worked to a point that I've always said to businesses, you don't want to just put everything under one umbrella. You want to be able to have under that tent multiple revenue and multiple streams of revenue. But from this pandemic, there is a silver lining that there are going to be more businesses I think they're going to develop. One, I encourage even our young people who are on this call and anyone else, we need to look at creating manufacturing opportunities and manufacturing companies back in our community. It exposed us as a nation to be so vulnerable that we were depending on international communities to support us now. And so we're even getting PPEs, they're having to come from India, Vietnam, from China, whereas we used to produce those things here. Technology is going to be an opportunity area for so many, and I encourage our young people to begin to look at technology, because now distance learning and how we operate, even from the mentoring and even this one seminar, we're going to have to depend on technology, and we don't know how much longer. For those HBCUs who could turn on a dime and be prepared to do the distance learning, they're going to survive pretty well, but all of our HBCUs were not prepared. And so we've got to make sure we are prepared going forward. And so working with companies again, Dr. Artis and all of us have been trying to bring in under our HBCU Sustainability Summit. We now have, again, Microsoft working with us, AT&T and Verizon and others who are going to be working with us. So with that, from the business perspective, we have to weather the storm, but remember, from like the book from John Bryant, it says how, again, the poor can save capitalism. Well, in this case, all of us need to understand it's bottom up for the survival in this nation. And so we've got to look at supply and demand. Our young people are smart. Our young people are talented. And so I encourage young people, this is a time to look at entrepreneurship, not a time to run away from it. And for those who are even at home and unemployed right now, think about things that are needed. I had a young lady that's made masks for all of my drivers in my transportation system. She wasn't into that business, but I paid her a good little bit of money to make sure my employees are safe and the masks are working. So young people, be creative as you are. You have the talent, you're the best and the brightest. And so during these times of challenge, turn these challenges into opportunities.
Well, Mr. Dortch, thank you so much. I do want to announce that we have quite a few amazing people who have joined us that are attendees, and they are in the chat box. I want to go ahead and call out their names and their titles. We have Dr. Romelda Simmons, Fort Valley State University. We have Lindsay Raymond, Associate Director for Student Life and Development at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania. And we have Travis L. Williams, Executive Director, HBCU All-Stars LLC. And just joining us now is also Allison. She says Allison Joyner is a freelance writer that writes about HBCUs. Welcome, everyone. So if you'd like for me to announce your name and your title, please go into the chat like the others have and put your name and your title. And we actually have a question in our Q&A. So let me go ahead and read that to everyone. And I'm going to unmute everyone, so whoever wants to answer this can just jump right on in, okay? Dre, I'm having a little bit, there we go, I see
it. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So the question that we have is, what factors will HBCUs use to determine whether or not they will have students back on campus for the fall semester or continue online learning?
So I suppose that one by default comes to me. Yeah, we're going to use data. We are going to use data. We have to have data-driven decisions. We have to look at the curve, the plateau, the descent in terms of the number of reported cases. We have to analyze critically our ability to provide appropriate personal protective equipment. We have to look at the availability of testing in order to ensure that our campuses are as safe as possible. And finally, our infrastructure and support in terms of actual square footage to provide the appropriate levels of personal distance, social distancing. And so they will be case by case analyses, certainly by state. We can't even rely just on state data. So South Carolina, for example, has not seen the number of cases that many of our large urban core cities have. However, 34% of my students come from those locations: New York, DC, Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta. And as a result of that, we have to be very careful and look at national data, not just localized data points. And so you will see our healthcare teams, our local docs, our DHEC for us, the Department of Health here in South Carolina, as well as our national statisticians to help us to provide predictive analytic models to make good decisions based on data.
Thank you so much, Dr. Artis. And we have more people online who have submitted their names and associations or titles. We have Joshua Menifee from the Georgia Association for Minority Entrepreneurs. Welcome, Joshua. We also have, oh wow, quite a few popping up. This is great. We have Dr. Michelle Thomas Drew, Assistant Professor of Management at Fort Valley State University. Oh, Mr. Dortch, Fort Valley State University.
Oh, the Wildcats in the house. Natalie, let me add one other thing as you getting those, because Dr. Artis is right on point. We just had our trustee board meeting, virtual board meeting for Florida A&M University just yesterday. And she's right, data is gonna be critical, and this is from the medical professionals. But just as Dr. Artis had mentioned with us at FAMU, and just last week we have a call coming up at being also a trustee for Clark Atlanta University, we're not under any circumstances going to risk lives for the sake of opening our doors. We will have to take the hits and take the losses because we intend to be around long term, and we will not contribute in any way to the loss of health and well-being of our students, of our faculty and administrators, and to our stakeholders. So it is painful, but like the leadership we have in Dr. Artis and our presidents and chancellors, they're not going to just open for the sake of saying we got to be open for business. And take it here in Georgia. I was just looking at the Washington Post that says 80% of all of those who have been hospitalized in this state are African Americans. And while Georgia is 31% African American, overall 36% of all those who have been infected in this state have been African Americans. And so what we have to do is not rush to go back to these restaurants and go back to these public gatherings. I still see our people having parties and quote cookouts, and this infection continues to move. This is serious. You can't look at a person and determine whether they have the virus. And it has also been proven now is not from coughing and just from sneezing, just from people who are infected talking, they spread the virus. And so with that, I want to commend our leadership on these college campuses, our leaders on the campus, to these trustee boards who are not going to rush, and ask our young people, be patient, because we want you here for a lifetime, because the future of our nation and for our communities depend on them.
Yes.
If I could chime in for a second as well to that point, I feel like there have been a lot of students at our HBCUs who are frustrated with administration demanding answers that just aren't there. We don't know how the fall semester is going to look, and I do want to encourage HBCU students to not take their frustrations out for what is going on, for especially our seniors, how their senior year ended, on the administration and on the student leaders who are working their best to advocate for their needs and thinking of them in every step of the process, but to rather be patient and to rather take the time to understand that this is unprecedented for everyone, not just for us as students, but for literally everyone. No one could have seen this coming, and everyone is just trying to do what is best and what is safest for all of us. So I think that's important to note to the students.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Can I chime in on that for just
Please do.
I think Tangela makes an excellent point. And if I could also urge you to channel that frustration, there are some areas where we need that same energy. We had, for example, internet providers advertising free internet for students who were displaced as a result of COVID-19. Except when our students called and tried to take advantage of that free service, they were subjected to a credit check and told they did not qualify and therefore had to pay a deposit anyway. Let's keep that same energy in dealing with businesses who are not being truthful and forthright with our students, who are positioning themselves in a marketplace. We have to hold them accountable. Part of the conversation around the Sustainability Summit is engaging businesses who have been supportive of HBCUs and us directing our support toward them in turn. We do business with people who do business with us. I am keeping a list and will not forget people who assist and support my babies going through this challenge when they advertised otherwise. As we think about broadband, so many of our students, if I can buy laptops, I can buy hotspots, but if you are in a rural community that has no access, there is no broadband, we have to hold our elected officials accountable at a national level to ensure this is the new currency. Connectivity is currency, and we have just seen how it plays out in our communities. We have got to insist on fair representation and access to the digital economy.
That's right. Thank you, Dr. Artis. Thank you, Mr. Dortch and Tangela. We have a question from Alexander Lowe. He is the SGA president at Fort Valley State University. And his question is, what role do you think student leaders play in this crisis?
That's a great question. I believe, especially as at the beginning of everything when we were, having to evacuate our campuses and no one was really sure what was happening and things of that nature. I think student leaders are, we are on the front lines in terms of conveying how the student body feels. So in order to do that, in order to be that type of catalyst, you have to be aware of how the student body is feeling. That's making polls, that's making surveys, that's making sure that these links are distributed. And it's also using whatever, platform and resources you have as a student leader to connect students to them. So for instance, as Ms. Spellman, I had direct connection to a number of Spellman alumni in the area, a number of Spellman alumni chapters around the nation. So while students are waiting to get approval for the emergency fund that Spellman has, in terms of money for that students can have, those who have, urgent needs, I have rent due the 1st. I can't necessarily wait to be cleared for this emergency funds. Where can I get a few $100s to help with that? I have the ability to link you to an alumni who can do that for you. So as a student leader, you use whatever your resources are to directly help students and to also publicize that you are able to do that. So ask students, does anyone need this? We still have group chats. People are still very active in these student group chats. So tell them about the resources that are available to them, because one of the things that I've realized throughout the situation, the frustration that a lot of students have with administration, with what is going on, is because they haven't made themselves aware of the resources that are available. That administration has created a number of channels of things for students and different ways that students can be helped, but students just, they don't know about it. And that's not really, when emails have been sent out, when people have tried to make sure that students are aware that there is help for them and the different ways that that help looks, it's kind of out of administration's hands, but this is where student leaders can really step up. It takes no time to make a cute little graphic. Hey, you need this type of assistance? Check your email. Hey, you need this? Hey, like we know because we are directly involved with administration and we know the different measures that are being taken, but a lot of students don't, especially right now when it's remote learning. Students are even more disconnected to the pulse of the campus than they were when they were here. So we really need to make sure that students are aware of what is going on, because what I don't want to keep happening is frustration that can be easily dealt with if you were just informed. So that's our place as student leaders. Also, I believe our place is this is where the creativity really comes out. So how can we still enrich campus culture? How can we still create events that are exciting and fun for students, that still make students feel like they are part of something bigger through these online channels? What does that look like? Is that a virtual party? Is that, just some type of forum where students can talk? Where do we fit in that manner? So it is trial and error. As I said, this is unprecedented, but this is where student leaders really have to rework their idea of event planning and advocating for students to fit this current pandemic.
Thank you, Tangela. And I want to go ahead and announce some more participants, some more attendees that have joined us. Hold on just a moment. There are so many, I have to scroll back.
If I can allude to that, to her point, I'm sorry, I was on mute when I was trying to add on.
That's all right.
Yeah, she makes a great point, and I think for student leaders, especially in the era where if you are using social media correctly, there's ways to be able to utilize your network, and the HBCU community is very, very responsive, in terms of, wanting to help these student leaders and these SGA presidents and students in general with helping them with partnering up and coordinating these types of events, right? So again, she said it's nothing to put together, a cute little graphic, right? I think that's funny because obviously she has a point with that as well. I mean, canva.com is a free resource that students can use to put together, an event demographic, send a proposal to these HBCU pages out there, and create a theme where you can still, create some energy and find some synergies, to keep some momentum going and keep, your campus and your student body active. So I just wanted to add that on there, and I'll close with that. But she makes a great point.
All right. Thank you so much, Dre. And I want to announce that we have Wallace Keys, Dean of Students from Fort Valley State University, Joshua Menifee, Senior Director, American Cancer and Board Member, Georgia Association for Minority Entrepreneurs. Romelda Simmons says, "Go Wildcats." Dr. Trina Coleman, United States Distance Learning Association Advisory Board Member and HBCU Nation host of Beyond the Classroom. Fred Formicella, Board Member, Founder, RAINDA I2 LLC. And we have Saul Diaz-Burson, Trustee of Black College Hall of Fame, Trustee Clark, Atlanta. And Deja Thompson, Albany State University alum and former SGA president and first attendant to Miss ASU. Welcome, everyone. Oh, and one more just popped up. Leandra Hayes Burgess, Vice President for Institutional Advancement, Benedict College. Welcome, everyone.
Great. One other thing I want to add, and with us, Natalie, Tangela will be hosting a series of forums and town halls just between students too. And while there are those of us who want to be engaged and we're going to always be available, I think the point she made is students and our young alumni need to communicate more. And the Hall of Fame will provide a platform for them to be able to continuously do that. I'd love to see a leadership summit where our SGA presidents and other leaders talk more, because nobody should be taking a vacation now. And I don't want students to think that there's not a major role they can play. And just as we saw how this country waited 4 to 8 weeks, even though some of the information we're receiving is saying that they knew as early as November of last year that this virus had hit our nation, and there were no efforts taken. Again, it's amazing that India, with so many hundreds of millions of people, has only about 1,000 infections now in that country because they moved. And we look at what Germany did and what other countries did. Leadership is everything. And so with the primaries that we have coming and the general election in November, students have got to now more than ever before, they've got to stand up and be counted. It's about making a difference for the quality of life for everybody. And that quality of life is not just about Black people. It's not just about Hispanic, it's about Americans. And so we've got to make sure we have leaders who are going to be concerned about us and our communities, because it's going to take real leadership after we get through this pandemic that's going to bring this nation to where it should be. And I read an article just yesterday where other countries now are pitying the US, whereas they used to look at us as being the power of the world. We're going to find that just as we try to block people out of coming into this country, unless we get control, they're going to block us from coming into their countries. And so I want young people to understand that they have a critical role to play as does all of us. We just got through, well, we're about to complete a census. This census determines where monies and hundreds of billions of dollars are going to go in terms of communities. And we've always been undercounted. It determines what's going to happen on how these congressional districts and local lines are drawn. It determines what happens with education. And so while students are sheltering in place or at home, don't forget we got these elections, and get your absentee ballots and vote and register. Even if your candidate didn't win, look at who's the best candidate to lead this nation. That's what we have to do. So we will make sure from the Hall of Fame that we will have all the support available. I encourage students to contact their alumni associations, contact us at the Hall of Fame. We'll try and connect you in with any resources we know of. As chair of the 100 Black Men of America, we have chapters all over the country, and they're developing additional programs. I want to encourage our students to plug in with every resource. United Way has programs. Even here in Atlanta, United Way put dollars in. Walmart's put money in to support efforts. There's the 1 million project from right now that's out there to try and help ensure that communities can get access to Wi-Fi without paying for it, and that's through Sprint, called the 1 Million Project. AT&T is doing some things. So we'll provide resources, we'll provide information for where you tap in. And like here, Hosea Helps is doing a phenomenal job. Fulton County Commission that Natalie spearheaded just provided about 400,000 just for them. They put aside 10 million to help communities. That's happening throughout the country. So to those on this call on us. We want to connect you. And that's one of the things as a community, we got to share information. So we're going to make sure that Tangela has whatever resources she needs to lead, because right now we want students to be leading just as much, not just us knocking on the doors and calling these people out to task. We've got to work together and understand the challenge is not just who's in the White House. It's the people who make up Congress and the people who are in these local communities. If they're not responding to the needs of our people and your needs, then the one thing that you have that Dr. King and others sacrificed, and Dr. C.T. Vivian, who led the cause for voting rights, you have that powerful thing called the vote to begin to try and put people in if the people in aren't taking care of all of our communities.
Well, Mr. Dortch, we had a question from Alexander Lowe, who was asking, in what way can people help? And any of the panelists, if you can, jump in and just, identify, let people know, how can they help? What perspective? Like Mr. Dortch said, I'll
start by saying, anybody that has resources, whether they're resources for a particular city, community, or state, if they share with us at our website, and I want you to give it to us multiple times, we will make sure that that is posted. We'll make sure through social media that Trey and Janice are handling for us, that they continuously put it out. With Dre and what he's doing, I did a panel for Dre. I commend him for all of the great stuff he's been doing. And there are other multiple organizations. We'll make sure we're networking to put the information out. We have some resources through the Hall of Fame we're still trying to make available, and from my own foundation and from everywhere else. This is a time for sharing. And so we'll do that. But individuals, if they'll just share what they have, Natalie, we'll make sure we put it out through the network. And as I said, we want to encourage more of our younger leaders to continue to communicate, but look at solutions. I mean, it's okay to talk about what the problem but we need solutions now. We need these great leaders, young leaders, to begin to provide solutions. The old saying is lead, follow, or get out of the way. I don't have a problem getting out of the way. I just want to make sure somebody's doing the work.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dortch. And I just want to announce that Miranda McKenzie, board member of National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame, is also on the line joining us. And she was actually the first question that I asked of the panelists. I want to also just encourage everyone who is attending right now to go to the Q&A section and ask any questions that you may have. And let me look at some of the questions so can anyone respond to this question? What is going on globally? What exactly is going on globally?
Concerning the virus?
Yes.
Clearly, our market share is increasing.
Go ahead.
Our market share is increasing as the United States of America. As we look at the number of reported cases and the number of fatalities associated with COVID-19, we continue to grow in terms of our market share, or the segment of the total world population that has been negatively impacted. As Mr. Dortch referred to earlier, when you look at highly populated countries that have been able to somehow contain the virus, that is a function of the efficacy of the response. It is difficult, I know, to make tough decisions, but sometimes they have to be made. Our students didn't want to go home. We didn't want to close out our semester, but the safety and health of our students had to be our primary concern. And so as we look at state and nationally and internationally, countries where leadership was firm, decisive, and fast are seeing decreasing death tolls. Countries where we waffled in an effort to keep the economy open are seeing spikes in cases. And so if you just watch those tickers, Johns Hopkins has a ticker that's divided out, of course, globally, and then all the way down to your state, county, or city. And you can see what that trend line looks like for countries, developed countries like the United States of America, and of course, what's happening in some of our, even our third world countries.
Thank you, Dr. Artis. And I just want to add that COVID-19 has impacted so many different things in our lives. And, you know, we have elections coming up, and I was on a White House call yesterday, and a lot of the states and counties and cities were on the call, and they were talking about the election. And some places are really trying to think of some innovative ways to allow people to still vote without having to go totally to an absentee ballot type of system. And so I heard things from places like North Carolina and other places where they are literally doing drive-up voting. So people are driving up and dropping off their ballot at a polling place and then driving off, where they don't have to get out of the car or anything. And so everything is being impacted. And we are also trying on the Fulton County side in Atlanta to ensure that funding is available, because everyone is impacted, from our seniors who are not able to get out and get to the food they need, as well as they don't have the income to buy the food they need, to our nonprofit organizations who generally assist every community in Atlanta and Georgia, to our small businesses and our entrepreneurs. And from the county perspective, I just want everyone to know that we are continuing to find funding and push forward in assisting our smaller municipalities, our communities, and nonprofits and small businesses. The county was recently awarded $104 million from the federal government, and it was twice as much as what we asked for. And we are very happy to receive that funding. But for me, it's important that we look at how we're going to distribute that funding. And so I'm working with my colleagues and the county attorney and the county manager to think of different ways that we can allocate the funding. We already have, as Mr. Dortch mentioned earlier, allocated $10 million toward nonprofit organizations and small businesses to help them continue in the fight of COVID-19. And we also have our Development Authority of Fulton County, who allocated $1.5 million of additional funding towards small businesses. But it is just not enough. There's so much need out there. We need to continue to look for funding. And so everyone knows I will continue the fight on that. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
Yes, Natalie, I want to chime in about, I know Dr. Artis mentioned the ticker that keeps count of, the different statistics, the changing statistics of COVID-19. And just for some facts, as of today, the US has 1,005,147 cases, 57,505 deaths. And that number of deaths is up 2,247 new deaths from yesterday. So within one day, we saw almost upwards of 3,000 deaths. And so for me, when I think about COVID-19 and what's going on in the world, I think with any systematic issue, what COVID-19 has done is it's highlighted the deeply rooted inequalities that exist in our world and our nation. That being said, Black and Brown communities are being most profoundly affected. Poor communities are being most profoundly affected. The essential workers that many people for so long looked down on, the people, the cashiers at the grocery store, public transportation workers, these people who really keep the nation moving and are now essential, are the same people that, when it came to, when we're talking about minimum wage, no one saw the reason why these people needed more money to have a living wage on. But now these are the workers who we depend on every day to go to work. Our healthcare workers, we depend on them to be in those places. And so I just feel like as a nation, we're really getting confronted with those biases that we had, with those inequalities that we had, because the numbers don't lie. So when you see African-American communities be affected in this manner because of pre-existing conditions, you have to ask, why do they have these pre-existing conditions? Those pre-existing conditions come from generations of disinvestment, of being left to their own devices, of being ignored in the manners that they are. So we can't ignore that. What I'm hoping for is that, and it might be a little optimistic, that once we are over this hurdle, that all these realizations that we came to during this period of time aren't forgotten. That these communities, that we realize the reason why Black communities are being affected in the manner they are is because you have a pandemic on top of an epidemic. We were already in an epidemic. Black people were already in an epidemic, and now we have a pandemic on top of that. Are we going to forget about that? Once everything is back to normal, once our economy gets back right, will we remember? And so I'm interested to know what will be the economic effect, what will be the, like the legacy of this period, but also really what will be the philosophical legacy of COVID-19? How will America change culturally, if at all?
Thank you,
and one other thing I want to caution all of us, we have our faith and we stay engaged, but here in Georgia, there was one funeral in Southwest Georgia that people went to, and 117 people from that one funeral were infected. The Black snow seekers on March 1 went out in Colorado for their annual trip. These are people with means who could afford to fly and do whatever they were going to do and have their fun, and ignored the warnings. Over 100 of them were infected from that one trip, and all of them went back home. And you can imagine how that spread back in their communities. There are people still going to church en masse, when in fact you can pray to your God. As I pray to God, I don't need a mass of people, gathering of people, to show my faith. I chair the board for Newburgh Missionary Baptist Church. We have over 5,000 people who are coming every Sunday, and over 37,000 who were online. We have a Morehouse grad, Dr. Jamal Bryan, as our senior pastor. We closed the church. We went to 71,000 online every Sunday, and on Easter we had over 200,000 people online. You can still observe your faith by not going to church now, and consider that. Stay away from these large gatherings, because that's how we're continuing to spread. And again, as I said, I've seen even parties here that the news has shown where Black people are having their cookouts with the music blasting and all right there with no mask. So young people, you can do a number of things as we address this. Our young people out of school need mentors. You can do virtual mentoring. Who knows technology better than your young leaders that we have who are not in school now? You can help to create opportunities to do online mentoring and tutoring. We need that, because I think the impact is going to hit our community as we look at economically how we're going to be impacted. Educationally, we're going to be impacted, because we're having to stay on our young people, even in my family, having to stay on my grandchildren and my children staying on their children, because they think it's a holiday and a vacation. But we'll be set back for a year educationally, and some of these young people are going to be advanced, and they're going to be a year behind on their education. Just imagine what that's going to do to our nation, to our communities, even to our colleges. So with all of that, yes, disproportionately, we're being impacted. This country, which criticized everybody else, now is leading the nation. Here in Georgia, 51% of all the deaths that they finally started reporting were 51% of the deaths from this COVID-19 were African American. And you'll find that around the country. I was looking at the numbers in Charlotte. You look at what's happened in New York, and you look at all over in all the small communities. So this country has not gotten control of this virus. And just one scenario, and I'll end it. You treat the virus just like our firemen treat a fire, a mass fire in basically a forest fire. You have to build kind of a separation from the side where the fire is by creating an opening and clearing so the fire cannot jump that clearing to impact the other part of the forest. Well, that's what's happening with us in the community. Too many of our folks are not sheltering in place. They have the virus, and it's not intended to spread, but it's spreading. We've got to get the message out. Young folks, through your social media, through your campaigns, you've got to take the leadership. To our college leadership, we got to all take the leadership and not blame the government. Yeah, there's plenty of time for us to blame the government for what it hasn't done, but blaming them is not going to save lives. And so I encourage us to be proactive, to do what we can. I mean, running 6 businesses and being at home for 6 weeks, I never thought I'd see the day that I had this long, and it is not a vacation, but to stay in for 6 weeks. Yeah, I want to be around. I want to continue to do the work, but we want all of you to be around to continue to do the work. While it may be an inconvenience now, it will save lives and we can be here for a lifetime. We got enough work to do after this pandemic, and we need everybody on this webinar. We need everybody in our communities there, because to come back later and said they were racist and they did this to us, the issue is not going to bring back the people who are dead. It's not going to make our communities healthy. So young people and folks we need to start planning for post-pandemic. We need to work with all communities, with all of our neighborhoods and communities. This is not a racial virus. This is a people virus, and our citizens are being hurt, and all of us working together. So I just wanted to put that out, because we cannot overemphasize that. We also need to understand our HBCUs, and this message is specifically for our alumni. Our alumni have not given to the extent that they should have over the years. You know, we're making the kind of money we do because of these institutions enabling us and educating us. That's why I have multiple scholarship funds at all the institutions where I got my degrees. But in addition to that, I give to students who are going to HBCUs. I've done that through every organization I work with, the earmarked dollars to go to HBCUs. But at the end of the day, if Mary McLeod Bethune could take $7 and start Bethune-Cookman when we made nothing, and now we have multimillionaires and billionaires and people who are making 6 figures, we need to understand, until we're giving, we can't complain about everybody else not giving if we're not stepping up. And so that's my challenge to everybody and to young people. For any challenges you may have had on your campus, and I did my undergraduate study at the Fort Valley State University, master's at AU, now Clark AU, went to Georgia State University, Ford Fellow. I can guarantee you, any institution you go to, you're gonna have something you didn't like. You're gonna have some challenges. But I can guarantee you one thing, these HBCUs are around for us, have been around for us, and we have an obligation to make sure we're around for them. So I challenge each of us to make sure that we do what we have to do to make sure that our institutions stay strong and we're there for them. So I just wanted to put that in, because these institutions, without them, none of us would be, but really because of our ancestors and the people who come, we wouldn't have the great opportunities and benefits we have today if it weren't for HBCUs.
Thank you, Mr. Dortch. And just doing a time check, it is 3:20. And this is it's just evident that this is a conversation that needed to happen. We are about to close out our webinar, but I want to let everyone know that we will have a series of webinars coming up weekly, with the first announcement being made this evening. And as you know, we have to work together. We're in this together. And so I want you to go to www.nbcahof.org and donate towards our efforts to assist HBCUs and the communities. That's nbcahof.org. And you can also find us on all the social media outlets at NBCA Hall of Fame. That's NBCA Hall of Fame on all the social media outlets, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're all over the place, and we are trying to help all HBCUs, and we need your help as well. And any final questions? I see we have a question we may be able to get in. It says, how are HBCUs combating the possibility of lower enrollment numbers this next school year that may be due to this pandemic? And what can the community do to help? That's a great question to close with.
I'll jump in. This is Andre Martin. I'll jump in. I know one excellent resource that prospective college students can use, to help sustain or continue to increase the enrollment statistics for HBCUs. One excellent resource is the Common Black College application. And that one Common Black College application, that one application that is sent out, one transcript that is uploaded gets sent to over 50 schools, to about, I think it's 55 schools. And that, leads to students being accepted into multiple schools and having a chance to be, to choose essentially from these schools, as opposed to going and paying and, potentially paying for individual schools. So that's just one resource. Obviously, there's a lot of economic disparities that come to factor in as well. Thurgood Marshall College Fund, of course, United Negro College Fund, obviously the National Black College, Hall of Fame. You guys have scholarship opportunities. These are also resources that we can use to combat these statistics on their decline. So we need to again come together as a community to help with these specific resources. And I know the Common Black College application is an excellent resource to use.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the community, all of our attendees. Thank you, panelists, Dr. Roslyn Artis, Tangela Mitchell, Dre, Martin, Mr. Dortch. Thank you all for joining us today. And please find us online. And Mr. Dortch, would you like to add any final words? You are our chair.
I'd like for Dr. Artis to close us out.
All right.
In the words of Cardi B, money. That was really going to be the answer to my last question, right? What can we do? We are making a decision for our students that takes into consideration their safety. If we are forced to remain in an online environment, again, access to broadband and technology and Wi-Fi capabilities will be absolutely essential. Tangela hit the nail on the head. Students need to educate themselves, be informed about the resources that are available to them. We are doing the very best we can with your best interests in mind. And so please stay in contact with your colleges. Those who are prospective freshmen, just as Andres mentioned, fill out the Common Black app, plan for matriculation to the HBCU of your choice or to Benedict. Okay, and Fort Valley, and maybe
Howard University.
Okay. This will pass. This too will pass, and we will emerge from this as strong, if not stronger. So do not give up. Do not say, I'm going to just take a year and go to work. It's really hard to come back. It may not be ideal when you start your matriculation. You may have to take a few courses online. You're going to have to wear a mask and you're going to have to maintain social distance, and homecoming just isn't going to be the same probably this year. But this will pass. We will be back stronger than ever, and your HBCU experience will always be among the most cherished experiences of your entire life. And send checks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Artis. And Mr. Dortch, any final words? We have 3
Nope.
minutes.
She said it all. Thank you to the panel, to those who are listening in. Every week we will be providing some kind of webinar, and send us your suggestions on webinars, and also let Tangela know what kind of sessions you like to have, because there'll be multiple sessions that may be of interest to you that may not be in the big global scene, but we want us to stay in communication. So that said, I thank everybody, and Commissioner, thank you for hosting this forum and for all that you do for our communities and what you're doing networking across this country. You're the best, and you know, I'm in your corner, and looking forward to you serving us in many years as a member of our commission.
Thank you. It was my honor. And I just want to remind everyone that we need you to fill out the survey. The link is in the chat right now. And please remember to visit our website at nbcahof.org and visit us on all social media at NBCAHOF, well, NBCA Hall of Fame. And please check out the chat. There are 2 links in there right now, sent to all panelists and attendees. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next virtual series. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.